Welcome. Tuesday, July 14th. Let me get my positioning here. My lighting okay, a little better. Seem to be in the shadow. As I'm speaking here in the beginning, feel free to write in the chat if there's anything I should know, if I seem there's anything I could adjust on my end. Thanks for being here. And today, let's see, I should say this week, what I'd like to work on a little bit is how being a human being is difficult, and how there are times that we can feel a bit overwhelmed. And then, due to feeling overwhelmed, we can feel a bit paralyzed in our lives. I have a relative who, like, she and her husband, she says that he suffers from analysis paralysis. And maybe you can relate to this or know someone who relates to this. Of the mind can get so analytical, and now with so much coming at us, that the mind can really get caught up in analysis, especially stuff that's unknown. We're dealing with a virus. We're dealing with racism and anti-racism, and so these are areas that we might feel like I am not well versed at this at all, and so we can get into this kind of paralysis of I'm not sure. So a great thing to do is to just stop. So right now, it's good to begin our practice by stopping and noticing any flavor of this. Again, in this, it doesn't have to have anything to do with what is happening in the world, but even when things are going well for us, we can still have moments of this seizing up, kind of a paralysis. So one thing I threw out there today in my weekly email was ways that you can just start to kind of melt this paralysis. And of course, one of them is yoga. Is coming to a yoga class, just roll out your mat and just sit on it and just see what happens. But there can be other ways. And I just put out there, explore anything that gets you out of the paralysis. So today, what we're going to be working on physically is a lot to do with the hips, because sometimes when we feel paralyzed, what do? We find ourselves sitting or, on the couch or in a chair. And the hips are in flexion. So we're going to be doing hip extenders today. That would be the opposite action of hip flexion. Now, when we really kind of examine this, this would mean then that we're not going to be doing a lot of seated poses, because when we sit, there's hip flexion. So you'll notice that a lot of what we're doing today then is not going to involve seated poses. So let's go ahead and begin. So this means that we're going to start reclining. So I'm going to have you just go to your mat. And the moment that you lay down on your mat, and you're going to let the legs extend, you're not even going to bend your knees. So you're just going to keep your feet on, or instead of the feet on the mat, you're going to extend your legs out. So that's hip extension, when the legs extend out, and just take your arms right down to the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and wander back to my mat and continue instruction from here. When you extend your legs out, then just notice how this feels. You might even take your hands like right in front of your hips, your hip joints, your hip creases, and just feel that space really open up. And then just start to reach your arms above your head. So now this is more of like a full body kind of extending, stretching. Reach through your heels. And even slightly draw your navel. Notice how this feels through your whole body and your lower back. So one thing we might run into when we're starting to do hip extension is the lower back might factor in. So relaxed here, you might notice that your lower back arches, that you have that curve to your lumbar. Now, if your lower back is really curving and arching, that might indicate that the front of your hips are tight, that those hip flexors are really tight. And that can have to do with actions, exercising that you do. Like, let's say you bike a lot. If you bike a lot, your hips are flexing a lot. Or if you sit a lot, that the hips are in flexion a lot. Now that's more passive, but still flexion. Stay in this nice big elongation. Breathe here. And then just bring your arms down alongside you. Now you will go ahead and bend your knees. As you bend your knees and take your feet to the floor, there will be hip flexion. But if you push right into your feet and start to lift your butt away from the floor, now the hips are moving back into extension due to the lift up. So let's go ahead and play with this a little bit. The action of this moving from hip flexion to extension. So drop your butt back down. And then as you start to lift your butt away from the floor, we draw the tailbone right up. So that is one of the key actions deep around this hip crease area. So this means you're going to work, contract your glutes and the backs of your thighs. Those hamstrings are going to contract, lift up here. And then just release back down. And just play with this a little bit, just to do this warm up. Lifting up, but pull that tailbone right up. And then lower down. So as you do this a few more times, what we want to learn here is that you technically could lift your butt away from the floor and stay in hip flexion. So we don't want to do that. So you can lift the butt up without lifting the tailbone up. So let's make sure then that you really lift the tailbone up and kind of really get a feeling for that specific action and lowering down. It's almost like when you lift your butt away from the floor, you could stay with a really arched lower back. So you could untuck your tailbone as you lift it up here, but no, you want to tuck your tailbone. And as you tuck your tailbone, this is going to decrease the curve in your lower back. We're just going to get in, just play Little repetition of doing that, waking up, introducing the extension and the hips. Now, as you let this go ahead and roll to the side, come all the way up, and bring yourself onto all fours. Now, when you move on to all fours, we also want to just get into some movement in your spine. So go ahead and move into a little cat and cow action. Thanks for saying that, Mary Pat. Finding back bends difficult. Yes. So I will definitely see we're warming up here. We're doing just that little bit of action in to be sensitive to your lower back as we start moving into this. So when you're on all fours, you're doing a little cat and cow. We just want to build the sensitivity, feeling your spine moving. Notice, oh, this is what it feels like when I scoop my tailbone under. This is what it feels like when I untuck my tailbone. Of course, we want to be able to do both of these actions and just bring in that fluidity of movement and sensitivity in the lower back. But now, as you pause and move into more of a flat back, take your knees a little closer together. And let's just reach that right leg back. Tuck your toes under and get a nice little toe stretch. Straighten your right leg. Lift your navel a little bit here and reach your chest forward. And then lift your right leg. Like, oh, that's different. Like, and you really lift the leg up. Now, this is in more of a full extension back. And then just switch. Bring right knee down, left leg goes back. You're starting to move. So if your left knee is down, that's flexion in your hip. And as you reach the left leg back, the toes tuck under, you're starting to extend through the hip. Just grow that awareness. Part of that extension is the lift of the navel. And then lift the left leg up. Keep lifting the navel up. Just not letting the belly really drop down here. And then as you bring the left knee down, just do that a few times where you're going to reach your right leg back, even splay your toes back there. Really reach your toes back and then reach your left arm forward. And make sure the belly doesn't just drop down here. So you're lifting and then you switch. Just go back and forth. And really get that pull back through that back leg. And really wake up that pure extension back. Extending back. You might even feel this pull and length through your whole spine. It's a good one to notice the relationship of the hip extension to the spine, that not compressing your spine. Good. And then just pause here and come up onto your knees. So the knees, this is a really great pose for working hip extension because with the knees bent, this is going to actually pull on your quads, on your thigh muscles a little bit more than if you were standing. So it might be harder to actually lift your front hip bones here and really drop your tailbone. Just take hands on your hips. And this is the same action of draw your tailbone in, contract the back of your thighs. Your hamstrings have to contract to open up and fully extend in your hips. Otherwise, it would kind of look like this. I would like arch my lower back here. So I have to work to pull and lift up the front of the hips. I like this pose because the knees are on the floor. They can't move. You can't start to rotate in your hips. It stays very neutral. And then just reach the arms way up. Keep this lifting up. So you're pulling up, lifting the navel up and your chest. And then just bring the arms down. And then to do this kind of one side across the chest. And then just switch. We'll just bring that right down. So we're just waking up all this awareness of the hip the flexors, the hip extensors. So it's the hip flexors that are stretching here. Those are your quads, thigh muscle. The psoas muscle connects your inner thigh to your lower spine. And when that muscle contracts, well, this is what it does. My left leg, so it brings your knee up. Bring the arms up. Drop your tailbone down. And get that lift of the front hips. So hopefully, if you have issues with back bending, that when we start with this, you're taking out any compression of your lower back here. So hopefully this feels kind of good in your spine when you pull your tailbone in. And then just letting go. Arms come down, feet come down. Now you kind of want to walk towards the back of your mat a little bit, move back onto all fours, and then just step your right foot forward. And as you move forward, move into this low lunge position. So take both hands to your left. Now this is a kind of a passive pose. And you might feel the stretch through the front of that left hip. Drop the left thigh down. We start with the hands on the floor, but as you really push into your right heel, you could lift up here. Now, the more that I lift up, I have to lift the front of the hips. And if you reach your arms up, remember, most of your weight is down through this right shin. Pull the navel up. So this is for that opening, that extension through the left hip. Now letting go. And just step the right foot back. Left foot stepping forward. So as you drop the pelvis down here, you're lowering your right thigh, dropping down. Certainly, you can stay here. If this feels just like plenty of stretch through the front of that right thigh, across the hip, or if you want to inch your way up, lift your navel and reach your arms up. A lot of work, that lifting up through your spine. Releasing down. And just move back. All fours. So on all fours, we'll do this little variation where you reach your right leg back, but then you bend your right knee. I like to also flex the right foot. So great tendency here. Again, when you bend the knee, it's going to pull and stretch your quads even more. So you might want to arch your back. So lift the navel. So there's those two, kind of the dual action here is the lift of the navel, but don't let your knee drop down. So you're lifting Reach back through that right knee. Keep the spine long. And then just release that left leg. You could start by left leg straight. Don't let the belly drop, lift it up. And then the bend of the knee. Again, maybe flex that left ankle. And notice the effort of this. That abdominal strength, lifting. Probably you'll feel that the back of the left thigh, those hamstrings are working. Good. And then just letting that go. As you let it go, move the spine. Just move into your cat and cow. Just to bring in fluidity of movement through the spine. So I know that I'm mentioning, like, this is especially good if you sit a lot. The thing about sitting is that even if you do have a really supple lower back that arches easily, the tendency when you're sitting in a chair or sitting anywhere is that it kind of pushes back. It would take a lot of consciousness to really be sitting upright when you sit in any position. So if you do find yourself sitting quite a bit, bring awareness to that. And if you can, maybe sit on the edge of your chair so you're not pushing back so much. So as we continue here, now of course we're not going to be just in this extension the whole time. So right now we'll do a little counter pose of down dog. So down dog is extension in the hips. But let's make sure that that down dog position is a big 90-degree angle in the hips. You might even lift your heels up here. And just stay kind of light and buoyant. Make sure the spine is lengthening. And then there's that lovely extension that you get when you move to your plank pose. So could you sense that there's no flexion in your hips in your plank pose? Whole tailbone in. Now, as you go back to down dog, instead of both hips in flexion, you could take feet a little closer together and just reach your right leg back. So guess what? Voila, extension through your right leg. Really reach back and just get that feeling of the front of the hip opening. If you want to, even lift the leg a little higher, like you're moving to the splits, you could do that. But let your hips choose. And then switch. Just bring that right foot down. Left leg, lifting up. Breathing and feeling. So we are going to, we're kind of building this. A little at a time, different ways of approaching that leg extension. Switch again, please. So we're doing this in a way that you are not rotating and opening your right hip. Rather, when you're reaching your leg back, you could even make sure your right toes are pointing down. So that's more of like the pure leg extension. Go ahead and switch. Sense that big stretch. Letting go, the foot comes down, and then just walk forward and bring yourself all the way up to standing. All the way. So as you come up to standing, you can bring your arms right down at the side, and you might even notice, like, oh, standing is extension in your hips. There really is not, or I don't know, shouldn't be a large amount of flexion. But if you sit a lot and those hip flexors are really tight, you might end up like kind of like this. So can you see my pelvis is really tilted? So it might feel like, oh, a lot of work to really drop the tailbone down and contract the lower abdominals. So the more you contract in the front, this is going to then stretch and elongate through your lower back. And again, this could actually be because you're very athletic, but it just so happens the activity you do is a lot of flexion. I know I've had a couple of students who are equestrians, who ride horses all the time. Boy, they are in that flexion. It's a lot of sensation for them to just stand upright. We're going to move towards the front of the mat, and we're going to take ourselves through sun salutation, focusing on a little extension. Now, for most of the time when we do standing poses, this has to be one leg at a time. So let's take palms together in front of the heart. Ground your heels, lift up. So get a feeling, no flexion in your hips. Arms come all the way up. And then just reach your arms out to the side. Keep right foot forward. Just step your left foot back. Start with your left heel up. So kind of a lunge position, and get that sense. The back leg is really going back in extension. So technically, extension means that your leg is going behind you. Flexion means the leg comes forward in front of you. You're lifting it. So staying here, maybe lift that navel up, lift the front hip bones up. And when you do that, it will be less of that crunchy curve in your lower back. And if this feels still really crunchy, you could just lean forward slightly. So play with like what really works to introduce that extension through the left leg. So full warrior one now, we're going to drop that left foot down and really ground that back foot. So warrior one, as you bring your arms up, is deep extension for your back leg. Make sure lower back is not crunching up. Almost to the point where you can sense that the muscles really, that whole area is starting to kind of melt and open. You can keep your arms up or bring them out to the side as we go to warrior three. So warrior three, now you're going to have to lift that left leg, but it stays in extension. Switch your weight onto the right leg. Really reach back. Lift your navel. Strong. Both legs lengthening, straightening. And just step back where you came from, that left foot dropping back. Move right into that warrior one, just to get that feeling. Deep in the hips. Lift, open up. Lift the whole front of the body from your pubic bone all the way up. Could you sense your ribs lifting up? Arms go to the side. Now just go to your forward bend and into your down dog. So we're going to switch legs now. You're going to move to three-legged dog with your right leg reaching back. So I'm sensing that extending back, like you're pulling your leg way back. Now, if you want to, you could let this just slowly move towards a plank pose with that right leg kind of floating. Make sure to lift your navel. So don't let your belly drop down here. You could take that right foot down or keep that right leg kind of floating as you lower down to your belly. Now with both legs down, the perfect position for leg extension. When you move into this little cobra, but here again, here's kind of that caveat. Please take your tailbone down. So that's right at, it's like you're planting the seed of leg extension. You're planting the seed of a back bend when you drop your tailbone down. And then just lift up to your forearms and move to your Sphinx pose. Reach your chest forward, pull your navel forward here. Be mindful of your back bend. Keep that tailbone drawing down. You might even lift your navel up here. Kind of play, explore. If this feels like too much, you just lower down, you take your arms, your elbows forward a bit. Keep breathing and bringing lots of space into your whole rib cage. Keep the length of the spine. Even if you kind of drop lower here, keep that pubic bone dropping down. So what I love, one great transition is moving from your Sphinx pose here, because you've brought so much energy into your spine here, is to just go briefly right to your Shalabhasana. Reach the arms back, lengthen and lift your legs. So you might already feel all the warming up we've done to open and get that extension going through your legs, like through your quads, even lower back. Move to down dog. So instead of that tailbone drawing in, we do untuck the tailbone. So we've been really working the hamstrings contract in order to stretch your quads. So briefly here, we get that stretch through the hamstrings. Backs of the legs. And then as you walk towards the center of the mat, come right up. All the way up. Palms together in front of the heart. Lift up the navel just to kind of maintain that lifting up. That kind of curious amount of leg extension, no flexion. Bring the arms all the way up. Arms go out to the side. Your left foot stays forward. Your right leg goes back. Toes under. So we keep that back heel up at first. Straighten the right leg, but lift the front hip bones. How does this side feel? Doing the action, that straightening the back leg, that lift up, contracting lower abdominal muscles, move it right up through the spine. Light. And then just dropping that back foot down. As you move to full warrior one, Just to notice the difference between that back foot and the ankle as you ground that heel down and lift the arms up. You ground down into the earth, lift up. So notice right at that juncture in the hips, just the right amount. If it's a lot of sensation, that's where you might feel like you have to almost lean forward a little bit in Warrior One. So playing with sometimes the smallest movement makes a lot of difference through hips and lower back. So as we go to Warrior Three now, you can keep your arms up. You could go out to the side. But notice like you're balancing on the left leg and you keep reaching back. Stand back, but now you're lifting the right leg. Get the lift of the navel. Breathing. As you step back where you came from, feet right away, ground, find your footing, Warrior One. Set awareness, whole rib cage really pulling up here, grounding down. Now the arms go way out, you fold forward, you move back to your down dog. And just to kind of work again that mobility through the hips and lower back, move to your plank pose. No flexion. And then you go to dog. So notice the flexion of the hips. So let this move back and forth. Lots of energy and awareness through the legs. Muscles of the back. Next time you're in your down dog, you go to your three-legged dog, you reach that left leg, lifting up. So if you let this kind of float down to your plank pose, lift, keeping that left leg lifted, but lift your navel. And then maybe keep the leg floating as you lower. Reach the legs back. Lift to, again, your Sphinx Pose. Breathe and feel through your spine. So this is that important area where I said you drop your tailbone down. It might almost feel like right at the very top of your thighs kind of slices in and pushes down to the floor. So feel this buoyancy of the chest, that breathing way up to the upper chest. Let this transition to your Shalabhasana, that lift of the legs, reach your arms back. And if you want to, bend the knees and just grab the tops of the feet, move to full bow pose. So this is now the bent knee position that really enhances that stretch and lengthening of your quads. Be sensitive for lower back. As you let this go, re-extend the legs. Move to down dog. Get that, just that kind of neutral pull and lengthen through the whole spine. And then as you walk forward, you right away come up to standing. All the way up. And just bring the arms down alongside you. So one variation of really getting into a leg extension that, since this is a level 2 class, we could also get into some upper body strengthening, is that great pose of taking down dog with one leg up the wall. So I know that this does require you to have a wall to use, but the other option is just to do this with just lifting one leg up. So you could just move to your 3-legged dog. Now, if you want to, I'm not even going to move my mat. I'm actually just going to take my hands on my mat and I'm going to take my heels up the wall. So my heels are touching the wall. And then I'm going to take my right leg and just start to reach my right leg way up the wall. And it doesn't matter. Some people like to tuck their toes under. Some people like to reach the toes up the wall. But there it is, that leg extension. Now, certainly the bottom leg is in deep flexion. So we're doing both. And then just switching, that right foot comes down, reaching that left leg up. So of course it matters, how close to the wall you are. You might feel like, oh, there's that upper body work of this is great training for doing a handstand even. Now, as you bring that left leg down, so yeah, you could have done that using a wall or not using a wall. Like you can just lift your leg up. But I'm going to do this one more time, and I'm going to get much closer to the wall. And as I get closer to the wall, I'm going to end up doing more of the splits, and therefore more leg extension. So I'm getting much closer and reaching that right leg up. It's nice to find a pose where you really can keep both legs straightening. Let yourself be there, breathe. Mind calm. Really study this, how it feels as the body is opening to this. Go ahead and switch. And as you let go, so you're going to bring yourself back to your mat. And we are going to move through another little sequence here, moving through sun salutation. And once we get onto the floor, we're going to go into a pigeon pose, and we're going to play with the pose of Mermaid Pose, which is a variation of our Ekapada Rajakapotasana. More of a full pigeon pose. Palms together. Ah. You might start to feel this accumulated effect through the hips, through spine. Stay really tuned in. Arms come up. As you move to your forward bend, notice we're not lingering in that forward bend pose. We're just going over and right back to down dog. Probably like a nice wide down dog, so let your feet go way back. And then move to your plank pose. So you're going to bend your right knee here. And as you bend your right knee, bring the knee forward and land on your right shin. So your right knee is touching your right wrist. Slowly lowering your hips straight down. So you're not dropping off to either side. Now, for some people, they move, the next move would be into that what's called simple pigeon pose, which is where you drop to your elbows. But if you do this, this is a really great pose for your piriformis muscle. It helps to keep any sciatica at bay. But if you really get into the extension, which your left leg is now extending back, we lift up higher. So this is where we get into the Raja Kapotasana, king pigeon. Lifting, the more you lift up, there's that deeper extension through that back leg. Now, I'm just going to go little by little into this, what is called Mermaid Pose. So start with this very lifted, now be mindful, this is the deep back bend. Mermaid is not only that leg extension back there, but really gets into a back bend. Maybe if you want to lift a little higher, get that full lift of the chest. And if that feels too much, you just lean forward. You might even go back to your elbows if that feels like enough. So next stage for mermaid, I'm going to tuck my back toes under. I'm going to inch that left knee way, way back. And then I'm going to bend left knee and lift that foot up. And I'm just going to take left hand and reach back. Now, when you reach back to your foot, you want to point your thumb up. So you're grabbing your inner arch of your foot. And again, here's that back bend again. Try not to list over to your right. So square your chest forward. Sometimes it feels good to actually push your foot into your hand like you would in a bow pose. However, mermaid pose goes the opposite direction. So maybe you really bend that back knee and you sneak your foot into the inner elbow. So, and if you do that, you're really bending the knee. That probably will get into a much deeper quad stretch on your left leg. Nice to give the body a little time here. So full mermaid, I know for me, my two sides really differ here, but you're just going to reach your right arm up. And then maybe reach over so your fingers touch. And you're holding your fingers. So I'm going to release that because I can tell I'm compromising a little bit. I'm starting to face my left, and I want to stay facing forward. Now make sure you don't kind of slingshot out of this, that you do kind of gradually let go, release that leg, undo this. Back foot tucks under, you lift the hips up, and you step back to your down dog. Move to your plank pose. Open through the front of the hips. And then as you bend that left knee, it pulls forward. You land on your left shin, left knee near your left wrist. As you lower down here, feeling that dropping of your right thigh down, you're reaching that right leg back. You really notice, the difference, how this feels on this side. That brief little simple pigeon where you drop onto your elbows. And then as you start to come up here, you move into Raja Kapotasana. But how does this feel? Various joints, muscles, lifting up here. This is where it's important in our practice to stay, often the word used is dispassionate. Because otherwise we can get a little too caught up in craving and wanting more, a better pose. So staying dispassionate, sometimes I use the word sober. So you're very clear what's happening. So the back toes tuck under. You inch that right knee back and then maybe bend the right knee. And if you reach back, again, your thumb points up, grab the inner foot. And if you stay here, this can just feel really good. You might push your foot into your hand. That kind of feels like bow pose a little bit. Or really bend that right knee and then sneak that foot into the crook of your elbow. So I know for me, I need to start to drop over to my left if I go to that full mermaid, if I want to reach my fingers. So I feel kind of compromised here. I'm going to bring my hand back down and kind of face forward even more. And just stay tuned, just that right stretch through those right quads. As you let go, mindfully releasing the leg. So it's good to kind of tune in, like how's your yoga? Are you staying connected? Your experience. So the back foot tucks under. You start to lift up a little bit. You move back to your down dog. Just give the body some time, space. Let the knees just lightly touch down. Move into your cat and cow. Back and forth. Let the spine just really move here. Fluid action. Good. Now you're going to go ahead and roll right onto your back side. So when we take all of this leg extension and this variety of positions, we started out here. So we're going to go right back into, I just think this position is more like for your fluid body. And it's just this gentle kind of inversion all the way up to your brain as you move to a bridge pose. So lift up, draw that tailbone up. So there is what is called half bridge. So half bridge is, you might sense a straight line from your knees through your hips to your shoulders. In a way, it's more of like a plank than a bridge. It's just more flat and straight. Whereas bridge pose really starts to get into that doming bridge. So if you want to, you could draw your shoulders under, really lift the tailbone, you lift your breastbone. Keep the feet pressing straight down, shoulders pushing straight down. And see how this feels through your upper chest, your throat, your neck. That lovely stretch through the back of your neck. Lowering down. Pause. Just take your arms out to the side, take your feet kind of wider apart, and then just drop your knees to the side. If you drop knees to your right, let your head roll to look to the left. And then just go up and over to the other side. So we just start to let this be really kind of liquid movement back and forth. Feel like through your hips, this fluid action. Actually, this can make a big difference when you're doing this. If you drop your knees, but then you just lift your top knee first. Let that leg open. So briefly, your knees are very wide apart. And then the other knee joins in. And that can just be an extra opening for your hips. I don't know what other word to use than a hip opener. Keep your throat soft as you're doing this. The breath really free, fluid. So because hip extension and back bends can be a lot of sensation for your lower back, one of my favorite things to do at the end of class is to kind of combine Shavasana with the legs up the wall pose. So you could, I'm going to suggest you grab it and fold it in a way that will go under your lower back. So I'm just going to show about this size of a blanket. Now you don't have to use a blanket. You could just take the legs up the wall. And this is the great thing about legs up the wall is it's a flexion without suddenly using your hip flexors again. like to just sit, kind of bring myself sitting on my blanket. And then drop to my elbows, swing legs up the wall. So that blanket is really not only under your butt, but it's more butt and lower back. So the area of your lower back that was working and back bending, now it sinks. It just drops right into the blanket. You can really use like a pillow, anything that you could just something soft to drop into. And then this ends up to be just this little gentle opener through your chest. I find this is very restorative after back bends, and to stay here for at least a few minutes to really let the body, let the lower back sink down. Arms can be out. You could take arms in that goalpost position also. Creates lots of space in your upper chest. I'm going to suggest that if you have legs up the wall, to stay there at least a couple more minutes. Maybe bring awareness to your breath and move into steady, steady awareness. You feel the breath moving into your whole body. whole body. And then possibly transition to Shavasana. Shavasana will take you back to that leg extension. It might be good just to move right into that. Or continue listening to your body, what it needs. It's like hundreds of years ago that yogis designed this practice. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of these whirlpools in the mind, the looping in the mind. And that's where we get caught and we get paralyzed. So long ago, the same dukkha was observed. These techniques, tried and true, how you bring your full awareness to your forehead or your eyes. You have to let go of everything else. And this is how we become unstuck. Really start to take these little steps back. Learning again and again how to really participate in life. Sometimes it's real self-care. Other times we might reach out and care for others. Right now is just this relationship with yourself, your body. Being unstuck is no small thing. Breathe, feel the softness, your lips, throat, whole neck, shoulders. Awareness to your breath. Very clear and practicing non-doing. As you start to transition, you can stay longer in Shavasana, or you want to practice that transition, coming back up to seated. Maybe having that real authentic understanding, like this matters to take this time, take care of yourself, taking this seriously. How you treat yourself really matters. Ongoing work. May we continue to do this work that leads to the deepest of happiness. And may we effortlessly then bring joy into the world, caring heart. Close with the sound of Om. You can take a deep inhale. Deep gratitude, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time. I know it's challenging. You're, probably at home alone in a room. um, but my wish is too that part of this experience is bonding with your own home, and um, that we can have that wisdom to take time, really take this little retreat time. So thank you so much, everyone. Um, Today is Tuesday, and there will be another class. So what happens on Friday is that I'll do this kind of extension practice, but there's going to be a lot of stuff we won't do. So like on Friday, we're not going to do Mermaid Pose. We're not going to do the splits at the wall. So it'll be, yeah, just a level one experience of this um, kind of counter pose to sitting class. And once we're not sitting, this is where it's those first little steps away from any paralysis that we might feel. And we're just one step at a time. So may you have a beautiful, fruitful practice. Namaste. And finally, too, I'll mention I have Saturday class this Saturday. It's from 9 to 11. Please send me an email if you want to be part of that. It's a Zoom class. So you can reach me through Common Ground, Nancy at commongroundmeditation.org, or at my website at boleryoga.com. You could send me email, Nancy at boleryoga.com. Yeah, would love to have you join that class.